Hey everyone, it's Michael Kikle. I hope you're doing well today. I have a review here for Berserk Volume 1 by Kentaro Miura, and I've never read this before until now. I actually reviewed this on my regular book channel, Mr. Wild194, probably about 2 months ago, alongside some other stuff like Spider-Man Fake Red and Batman Justice Buster. But like I said on my review for Fake Red for this channel, I'm going to re-review a lot of these comics I've recently been talking about on that channel, because I think some of them are really important. I'm early on enough in some of these series that I could probably cover them here and get some views for this channel. Now, Berserk is super popular. It's very gory. It's basically dark fantasy. If you had like a Dark Zelda series, that's kind of what this is like. I'm not the biggest fantasy guy. If I'm going to read fantasy, I have to have kind of a dark edgelord feel to it. And Berserk has been recommended to me forever, from some of my favorite YouTubers all the way up till different channels and stuff, anime channels even, talking about the different movies that were made for Berserk. They've all recommended it forever, and I finally decided to pick it up and check it out. And at this current moment, I recently finished reading Volume 2 as well, so I'm going to review this and then Volume 2 after it. But let me tell you from the get-go, this book surprised me so much. Number one, with how bloody it is. Number two, with how cool it is. Number three, with how stylistic it is, which I guess can factor into the cool thing. But number four, with how simple and well thought out it is at the same time. Basically, we follow a guy with no name for most of the book, and eventually we find out his name is Guts, and he may or may not be cursed. We're not really sure. There's a couple of hints to that in this book. You find out more about that later on. And he's kind of just a guy who wanders around and deals with demons of his own, demons of other people that try to come after him. And it's pretty interesting. He has one arm. The other arm apparently got cut off at some point. We're not really sure yet what happened. You don't find out in this book what happened, for that matter. He has a missing eye, also. So one of his eyes is always shut, which made me laugh a little bit. Not because I like and think it's funny to lose an eye, but didn't really know what was up with that at first. I thought it was just like one of those cool guy expressions, which it is, but one of the cool guy expressions you see in other anime and manga and stuff. And it was not. He just doesn't have an eyeball in that socket. But anyway, he clearly, from the scars on his body, the missing arm, the missing eye, has been through a lot, and we're not really sure what that is. The book opens up with him fighting some kind of demonic entity that he was having sex with. Yeah, it's weird. But this was a great read. It was really great. It was everything I've wanted from kind of a fantasy, horror, dark fantasy type of manga or comic or something. I was talking with somebody the other day in a Geekvolution Discord about how it bothered me that they don't really make horror comics anymore. You might see some from overseas, but here in America, you really don't see many publishers of IDW or anybody putting out effective horror comics. I think Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, has a series called Lock and Key. I think that's what it's called, and I think it's still going. But I've never read it. I tried reading like the first volume, I never finished it. Not because it was bad, just didn't get around to finishing it. So they don't really make stuff like that anymore. And I wanted to see something like that. I've wanted to be on that reading list for something like that. I've had that interest recently for some kind of horror comic of some sort. And like I said, I'm a big horror guy. There is not much out there to pick from. So I picked this up, and I read it about 2 or 3 months ago, like I said, and the art from the get-go was gripping. Very weird opening with the sex with the demon thing, but the actual art itself is some of the most beautiful, portrait-esque art I have ever seen in my life. Ever. I could not believe it. It's magnificent. It's mostly just about Guts wandering around. One of the first things he does is wander into a bar in a village or whatever, and save this fairy that is being held captive to have darts and stuff thrown at him on a dartboard. And he saves this fairy, and he didn't really mean to, but he kind of accidentally does. Guts is a very secretive, mean-spirited dude, and this little fairy named Puck, as we find out, wants to befriend him, thank him for helping him and saving him, and Guts has to kind of break it to him, like, I didn't do this for you. I don't even know you, I don't like you, I don't give a shit about you. And Buck being a fairy, he's very elegant, very sweet, and to me, the comedic relief of the entire book. He's just so goofy. There are certain comic panels in here that the facial expression they give Puck makes me laugh every time I see him on screen. I love him a lot. I think the design is kind of weird. He's just like naked all the time. But it is what it is. And he follows Guts around a lot. Kind of, again, trying to befriend him. And Guts doesn't want that. Matter of fact, this should make it even more interesting about Guts. Guts doesn't need that. Not only does he not want it, he doesn't need it. He doesn't care about having people around him. And he seems like a guy who's lost a ton of things around him, whether it be parts of his body, maybe family, friends. We don't know anything. Even by the end of this volume, you really don't know much of anything. But Guts has this awesome, humongous long sword that you've seen in things like Final Fantasy VII and typical anime stuff where they had these huge swords. I don't know if Berserk inspired that or something else did, but it's awesome here. And like I said, it's a bloody book. If he swings that massive sword, somebody's going to lose something every time. And it is awesome. The fight scenes feel like they're in motion. It almost feels like you're watching an anime itself when you read this book. And Volume 2 is even more like that. The only complaint I have at all, that I think is more of a taste thing than anything, because I've never read anything with this kind of art style for comics. Sometimes, since it's in black and white, it's kind of a little hard to look at it and understand what I'm looking at. Sometimes. Very rarely. And that's why I don't really consider it an actual negative about the book. But that's really the only complaint I have. Everything else, from Guts as the well-realized character he is, and Puck the way he is, they're kind of non-camaraderie, they're kind of non-communicable way, whatever we're trying to say with that. The way they have their own little relationship of not really liking each other, even though Puck wants to care about Guts, and the small adventure they go on in here, eventually wandering into an empire itself run by this really creepy fat dude. It's a great read. It's kind of meandering, but that's not really the word to use. It just kind of wanders into its plot sometimes, and you don't really read comics or see movies anymore that do that, which is kind of wild. But the art will carry you from story to story and location to location wherever they're going. But let me tell you, this series is dark, dude. This book is kind of already cold-hearted and mean-spirited, but Volume 2 is even more so. I have Volume 3 on my desk. I haven't read it yet, but I heard shit really gets dark in that book, even more so than these first two, which would be crazy to me if that was the case. So I am thrilled to read this and love it as much as I do. If you haven't checked out Berserk Volume 1, you need to. Just take the time, check it out. They have them available even at Walmart now, which is kind of cool. But sadly, we lost Kentaro Miura recently. I think as of like December of last year, sometime early last year, and beginning of this year, I don't know. But it's pretty sad, man. He didn't get to finish the series. I think somebody else is doing that, or the publisher hired somebody for that, or a student of his, or something. I don't know. But this is really great, and I recommend it highly if you haven't checked it out before. It's one of the best comic runs I think I've ever seen in my life, too. And probably one of the best manga I've ever read. My current favorite right now is either Dragon Ball Super or Die Dark. Die Dark was absolutely phenomenal. All 6 volumes have been 5 out of 5 ratings for me, for what's currently out here in the US. And Berserk is a very different beast, so I don't know. I'm in the midst of all of this great media I've never watched, barely heard of, and this is incredible. So, with all that being said, take my recommendation. Go check out Volume 1 of Berserk. Berserk? I can't say this name. Forgive me for that. Damn me with a microphone video. It's going to be hard to say this properly every time I talk about it. But check it out if you haven't read them before. It's great. Already, from Volume 1. And it could dip down in quality later on, but there's some die-hard fans out there of Berserk who swear by this, who swore about it on my other review I did for my book channel. So I'm going to trust them on this because what I'm seeing so far is immensely impressive. And that's hard to do for people like me who grew up watching and reading a lot of this stuff. And very rarely do I find one that kind of blows my socks off the way this or Die Dark did. But this is great. Very, very great. Check it out. Thank you all for watching, guys. God bless you all. Catch you later, and goodbye.